All right. And so the next thing that we're going to go over, right, aside from just the annotations, is going to be view settings and kind of setting up views and setting up sheets and getting them ready to print. All right. So we've kind of briefly talked about some of the view settings, all right, and obviously how we navigate around things, um, and how to place 2D elements now, how to build everything, right? But we're going to kind of get into a little bit more of the detail on the view settings themselves, right? How we can adjust everything, and again, how we can kind of set things up to be ready for print. All right. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll go through a basic floor plan here. All right. And with the floor plan, we'll go through all of the settings that you have associated with it. All right. And essentially is the settings that you have for a floor plan, all right, are going to be the same settings that you can change for your ceiling plans and your elevations and any of your detail views or anything like that. All right. So we won't have to go through them for each individual one. All right. Because the settings are essentially the same, but they only refer to that one view. Okay. Now, if we go to one of our floor plans here, all right, and we kind of zoom out a little bit so we can see everything, all right, some of the view settings that are kind of quick to access, all right, are either going to be on the left here in your instance properties, all right. So if you have nothing selected, all right, if you just click on the modify arrow, all right, or hit escape a few times, all right, kind of click off into space, make sure you don't have any objects selected, all right. When you see floor plan on the top here, your type selector, you know you have nothing selected. All right. You should be able to see your view settings, all right, in your instance properties, and you'll see most of them on the bottom here as well. Okay. So we'll run through them quickly. Um, in the instance properties here, if you go, you can see view scale, right? So it's set at 1/8 of an inch equals a foot. Okay. You'll also notice it down at the bottom of your screen as well. All right. So if you click on this, you can change this around. All right. You can see you have most of your basic and common scales. If you scroll to the top, you can see you can set a custom scale as well. All right, scale value 1 to whatever. Okay, so if you have a custom scale that you wanted to set, all right, in this case, that was set at an eighth, I think. Okay, all right, and so you can change that scale around. Now, if you change this to a different scale, so as I was saying with your text, right, if you change it, so we're at eighth of an inch now, if you change it to something like a quarter, right, you can see that it looks like the text got smaller, right, because the scale of the drawing actually got larger. Well, what happened is that your text actually didn't change size at all. Like I said, is the drawing itself, right, actually got larger, right? The scale of the walls and the doors and all that. So as you have quarter inch here, if you went to something a little bit even bigger, 3 inches, right, you can see all your text gets really, really tiny, all right? It looks like the size of the drawing itself doesn't actually change, but it looks like the text changes sizes, right? It's actually the opposite, is that this drawing is actually getting larger, all right, and the text is actually staying the same size, all right? And you can see the different direction if you go and start to make things bigger, all right? If you go to a little larger scale, all right, you can see all your annotations again getting very large, all right, depending on what scale you're viewing it at, right? And so with that being said, is as you can imagine, you're going to have different floor plans, you're going to have different elevations, and they're going to be at different scales when you go to print them, all right? So you're going to want to create a couple different either dimension lines and dimension types or a couple different text types, right, that have different size text. So you might have this text here, right? It's quarter inch Arial. You can see you have a 3/32 here by default as well, all right? You may even want to go a little bit farther and create a few more, right? 3/32 eight scale. Maybe you want to do an 1/8 inch scale text, all right, something like that, and just kind of go through and create, your own text sizes. So that way, no matter what scale you're in, you can always change the text size around, all right, so that it prints out correctly. okay? And the reason, again, that you want to duplicate and create different types for every single size is because if you go into this text here and say, oh, well, in this view, right, the text is too large, so I actually want to change it, right? You go into your type properties and change the size of it. Is every other view that you have this 1/4 inch Arial text drawn in, right, is just going to change the size in that view as well, right? And so if every other view isn't at the same scale, it's going to start affecting those and looking funny as well, okay? So again, just to reiterate on it is make sure that you duplicate your types before you change your type properties, okay? All right, so that's the view scale, all right? Right here where it says display model, it says normal. Okay, if you drop that down, you can see halftone do not display, all right? So you can, if you see halftone, it goes and changes all of your model elements to halftone, or you can change it to none as well, or do not display, and it changes, shuts off all your 3D elements, right? It only keeps the 2D elements there, okay? Um, Detail level, right? So we talked about this briefly when we were talking about the walls themselves, right? But if you go from coarse, you can go medium to fine, right? Change the detail level of it a bit, right? So when you have your walls here and your materials and things already set, right, you can just switch it from coarse to fine or medium, right? You can see that it goes and automatically adds in, a little bit more detail for you, right? So it adds in the layers for your walls, right? So you can see those there, all right? Again, that'll be on the bottom here as well, right there on the detail level. Right, parts visibility. Now we're not going to get into parts because we don't really have much time to do it in this class. But I would recommend you look into parts, all right? Whether it's in one of the textbooks, all right, that is on the syllabus that's recommended, right? I believe they go through and explain parts in there. Or if you want to just do a quick Google search online and learn about them, right? Parts can be pretty, valuable depending on what you're doing. All right, essentially it allows you to take something like a wall, all right, and break it into each individual piece and, modify each individual layer a little bit separately, okay? So again, it's something that's pretty useful, pretty cool that Revit's added in, and although we won't get into it in this class, it's something that you might want to go and explore on your own, all right? The next two here, visibility graphics and graphics display over options. I'm going to skip over those for now, okay? We'll come back to them in a second. Underlay, all right, as we talked about this when we were talking about level 2, all right, so if you go to your level 2 floor plan, all right, you'll notice that the underlay is set to level 1, right, so basically you're looking at your level 1 floor plan underneath. Basically, it just allows you to have something there as kind of a backdrop, right, when you're going and you're actually drawing, an upper floor if you're trying to trace, exterior walls or long walls that are already on your first floor, right? It allows you to do that. So you can change the underlay from whatever floor you want or whatever floor you have there, and change the orientation as well between the plan and the reflected ceiling plan of that floor. Okay. Under orientation, right? Project North or True North, right? Again, depending on how technical you're getting with your project, you may have rotated yourself and rotated your project so that it faces where True North is actually facing. All right, again, to get the most accurate sunlight and where the sun's actually coming down to your building. If you haven't got into the site settings much and worried about rotating your site so that it's facing True North as opposed to, the Project North, don't worry about it. You don't have to at all to have a successful project with it, right? But just know that you can go and change the difference between True North and Project North. Okay. Discipline, right? Where here it says architectural. So if you have, all the other stuff modeled in here, the structural members, mechanical, plumbing, HVAC, things like that. All right. You can change what discipline you're looking at here. And so depending on what you change, all right, it may turn things on and off. All right. It also might gray certain things out. So if you click on coordination, all right, it kind of shows all of the trades together. Okay. So generally, is you're probably only going to stay on architectural. So you won't have to worry about the other ones. But you can change that around the discipline from one to the other. So that way it changes the view settings for that exact view. All right. the show hidden lines, again, you probably won't change this around much, but either none, by discipline, or all. All right, so depending, again, on what the discipline is set at here, right, whether or not you show hidden lines associated with different objects. Right, color scheme location. We haven't got into color scheme yet. All right, so we won't have to worry about this just yet. We'll talk about it more when we get to scheduling. All right, the color scheme. All right, again, system color scheme just underneath that. All right, and then default analysis display style. Okay, again, if you're doing analysis, this is how you can change around what the default display style of it is. Okay, sun path. You'll notice you have sun path on the bottom here as well. All right, is if you click that on and off, depending on what kind of a view you're in. All right, you'll see that it basically brings up a sundial. All right, and so when you turn shadows on or off in your drawings and in your views, all right, you'll be able to see where the sun's coming from. All right, and kind of use this in solar studies. Okay, so you can turn the sun paths on and off. Okay, under here, under extents. Sorry, there we go, under extents. So crop view, right? Whether or not you want the view to be cropped, and then the one just underneath it, crop region visible. All right. You have the crop region visible. Okay. So if you click on it, right, drag it around, you can see that you can crop your view out. All right. So if there's only a section of the view that you actually want to show in print, right, you're able to do that with that crop view. Okay. And obviously, whether or not the region is visible, is you can turn it being on and off for the visibleness or the vision of it. That way you can go and crop a view. You don't actually see the line itself. All right, so that way that doesn't print out. But again, whether or not you want to crop your view is up to you. All right, annotation crop. This does the same kind of a thing, except that you crop certain things out. So, for instance, if we crop our view, right, annotation crop. All right, this does the same thing with crop region, except the hard line here now is where it's going to cut off and crop the physical model. All right, the annotation crop, what it does is it allows you to drag this out so that, for instance, if you have an annotation, right, such as that tag right there on the wall, is it allows you to, drag out and extend your annotation crop so that annotations, all right, past this solid line will still show up. All right, so you might have the physical crop dragged in a little bit farther there, right, but it shows the actual annotations out a little bit farther. Okay, so again, it all depends on visually what you're going for. All right. Okay. Now, with us in a plan view, all right, is the next thing down here under extents is view range. Okay, now the view range within a plan view, all right, is it's going to go the same for a ceiling plan as well, except it's going to be the opposite because we're going to be looking up. All right, but a view range, if you click on it, okay, is basically going to be the parameters that you set for where this plan view is looking at. Okay, so we're in floor plan level 1. Okay, and if you think of the view range as a cube, all right, and I will post an image up as well to kind of illustrate this a little bit better. All right, but if you think of this as a cube where you have a very top plane, all right, and you have a bottom of the cube, okay, and then you have a cut plane in between. So basically, this is where you're telling Revit to cut through your walls. All right, so the very top is going to be the top of the cube, and even though you're not going to see it, right, this tells you how much you're going to see in your view itself. So if you have this is set up to 7'6" right now, so anything above 7'6" isn't going to be considered in your plan view. All right, so any kind of hanging pendant fixtures off your ceiling, anything like that, all right, anything below the 7'6" is going to be considered. All right, your cut plane is where Revit goes and cuts through your model. Right, so in this case it's set at 4 feet, so it's basically going up 4 feet from your floor and cutting all the way across and through everything. Right, so it's cutting through your walls, your windows, and everything like that. right? So if for some reason your cut plane is up, you know, below your windows or it's up above your windows, all right, is you may not see any of those windows, all right? And we'll play around with it in a second, so you can kind of see how you can change that around, all right? But that cut plane is basically where you're cutting through your plan view, all right? And the bottom is basically how far down you can see. Now, you'll notice you have bottom and then you have the view depth here, all right? Is these, if you think of them as the same exact thing, that you're going to want them to be the same, all right? Is the difference between them is that you can see you have these top three, the top, cut, and bottom as your primary range, and then you have your view depth. All right, so everything in your primary range, right, shows up with the line weights and line thicknesses that you have specified. All right, if anything's caught between the bottom and the view depth, all right, so if you think of, let's say, your second floor plan, all right, and you have a balcony and it shows down, um, to below what's on the first floor, right? Is if you set the bottom of your primary range to level 2, but your view depth is set all the way down at level 1, right? That means it's going to show things that are down on level 1, all right, that are past kind of underneath or below the balcony there, all right, because it may be open to below. But instead of showing it at the same line weight, it's basically going to show it at a lighter line weight, and so that way you're going to visually be able to tell that it's beyond what you're looking at. All right, it's beyond your primary range and it's actually down below the rest of what you're looking at. Okay, so that's basically the space between the bottom plane here and the view depth. Okay, but like I said, generally speaking, unless you're in that unique circumstance, is these have to be, or these are generally set as the same. Okay, but you also need to take into account is that they all have to stay in the same order. All right, in which case, what I'm talking about is the top plane always has to be the highest. All right, followed by the cut plane, followed by the bottom, followed by the view depth. All right, so these can share the same planes. All right, so the top plane can be the same as the cut plane. All right, and vice versa, the cut plane can be the same as the bottom. All right, but the bottom can never be higher than the cut plane, and the cut plane can never be higher than the top plane, and so on. All right, so they always have to be in the same order. And if you do, for some reason, switching them up, and you try and hit OK or apply, is Revit will tell you that they're out of order, and you have to rearrange them. Okay. But in this case, for right now, is I'm going to hit OK. All right. We're going to keep scrolling down here. All right, we're going to skip over scope box and depth clipping for right now. All right, because those are better described in the elevations. All right. And under identity data, all right, you can see that view template. We're going to skip that for now. We'll go over that right at the end once we have all our settings done. All right, your view name and all of these here. Right, your title on sheet. Right, for example, is once we place sheets, you can see we'll be able to change this around a little bit more. But you can actually tell Revit that you want the title of this view to show up differently once you place it onto a sheet. So in this case, where it just says level 1 floor plan, all right, maybe the title on the sheet you want it to physically say level 1 floor plan, east building, whatever it may be, right? So you can actually have the title that displays on the sheet be a little bit different than the title that is named here in the project browser, all right? And you don't have to change the name of the levels and everything like that. Okay, but again, once we place a sheet, we'll be able to go over that. Okay. Now, on the bottom bar here, we didn't finish going over what was here, but the sun path, all right, we saw that on the left side there. All right, shadows, right, for on and off. If you turn shadows on and off, right, depending on what your settings are for your sun, right, you can turn the shadows on, right, and again, if you had the sun path on, okay, right, you'd be able to see, again, the direction that your sun's coming in. All right, shadows on and off. All right, the crop view, all right, show crop vision. All right, those were options over here on the left. All right, now the glasses down here, right, and the light bulb are all about hidden and unhidden objects in your view, right? Now we're going to go back and look at your visibility graphics screen in a second, all right? But what you can do with these glasses here is not so much here in your plan view, but when we get into a 3D view, you'll use it a lot. But what the glasses do, it allows you to temporarily hide or isolate certain elements. So let's say you have a bunch of stuff going on, you have a big building, you got everything going on, and it's a little bit busy in a certain area. All right. If you wanted to select a certain wall or anything like that and hide it, right? If you selected it, came down to the glasses here and said hide element, right? You can see that it goes and it hides that element and disappears, right? Now that's only temporary, right? And you'll notice that by the kind of cyan colored border that comes up around your view. All right, so that it's kind of a visual note to you that there's something temporarily hidden in this view. All right, and so again, if there's something in the way, maybe things are getting a little cluttered in a certain area, you can click and hide or isolate these items. All right, and if you click the glasses again and do reset, okay, those show back up. If you quickly go to your 3D view, this will work a little bit better in a 3D view, right? As you go and close these buildings up, right? So you have walls, you have roofs and everything on it. You can't see anything inside. If you select a wall and then click on the glasses and do hide, right? You can hide that element. That way you can kind of see inside of your building. All right, so you'll probably use it a little bit more in a 3D view than you would in a floor plan view. All right, but you do have the ability in all of your views. Okay, and then the light bulb here basically reveals any items that are hidden. So anything that's temporarily hidden, right, or anything that's permanently hidden, all right, will show up here and show up in pink. So in this case, these little symbols here represent your project base point and kind of your origin point of your project. All right, and kind of by default in all of your views, aside from your site plan, right, these are hidden. Okay, so you can see that those there are hidden in our views because they're bright pink, right, and you're able to select it. Anything that's hidden, if you were to select it, right, and right click, right, is you can unhide those objects. All right, but if we unclick it, all right, there we go, we're back to our normal view. All right, so that's kind of how you can find hidden objects. Right. Now, aside from temporarily hiding objects, all right, with those glasses, is we can permanently hide, or what's called permanently hiding them. All right, so when you temporarily hide something like that, right, even if you forget to hit reset, right, and you go to print this view, that object's still going to show up when you print it. All right, so when it's temporarily hidden, you're still going to see that object when you print. If it's something where you want to hide it completely and you don't want to show it and you don't want it to show up when you print, all right, is if you select an item, let's say this wall here, right, and if you right click on it and scroll up to where it says hide in view, right, you can see that you can hide in view and do elements. Right, what that's going to do is it's going to hide that element or multiple elements that you have selected. All right, and it's going to do what's called a permanent hide. Okay, so it goes and it hides that wall for you. All right, now again, like I said, when you go and print this view, that wall won't show up. Now to get it back, because obviously now we don't have kind of a quick button to get that back, is if you select the light bulb, all right, again, you'll see that pop up, and because it's pink, we know that that's hidden. And so we can select that wall, we can right click and go to unhide now and do elements, all right, and that'll go and unhide that element for us, and we can see that wall's back now. All right, so again, in a plan view like this, it might not be everything that you're going to want to use it for, all right, because you're probably going to want all your walls and doors and stuff to show up. Okay, but a lot of times in 3D views or anything like that, there may be objects that you want to go and just kind of hide from the view so that it's a little bit cleaner when it prints. Okay. All right, so now that we've kind of gone over the stuff on the bottom here, right, the last couple things on the right, all right, are all kind of have to do with the analytics and kind of temporary settings, all right, so we're going to kind of breeze through those because, again, we're not doing any sort of analysis tools in this class, all right, but if we go back to our property settings for our view, all right, we remember we kind of brushed over the visibility graphics overrides and the graphic display options. All right. So if we click the graphic display options first and do edit, all right, you can see here we have style hidden line. right? So if you drop this down, you can see you change it to wireframe, hidden line, um, shaded, consistent colors, realistic. All right. So this is basically going to be, the visual style that you're looking for at your view. All right. In this case, you're in a plan view, so you're not going to really notice it much. But when you go to a 3D view, you'll see the walls change and the visual style of it change. All right. You'll also notice that the little cube in the very bottom here. All right. That's what that cube is the display style. Okay, and so you can change this around, silhouettes, transparency of objects. All right. You can see you can change around your shadows as well. Okay, cast shadows, ambient shadows. All right, and also play with lighting options in your view. Okay, and so these are kind of just some graphic display options that you can play around with to, change the way that this view looks. Okay, and I'm just going to hit OK on them. All right, so again, those are kind of your shadows and things like that you can play around with. Now the next one above it, right, the visibility, graphics, and overrides. All right, this is probably going to be one of the most important screens that you're going to want to know. All right, so if you click on this, all right, this is going to be your visibility / graphics override. All right. Now what you can do here is you'll see you have multiple tabs across the top. You have model categories, annotation, all right, analytical model, imported categories, and filters. Okay. So if we go to model categories, all right, every single piece that you model in here, right, that has any sort of 3D, all right, is going to have the category associated with it, right? So casework, ceilings, columns, so on and so forth, okay? What you can do from this screen is if you think of AutoCAD, the way that you can turn layers on and off, right? You can freeze certain layers, you can turn the visibility off, everything like that, right? Is you can do a similar thing here in Revit, all right, except instead of turning layers on and off, it's called turning categories on and off. All right, and under model categories, you can see here is scrolling down. So let's say for some reason you wanted to shut your doors off, right? If you clicked on doors and unchecked it, right? And if you hit apply, all right, and I can move this around, all right, you'll notice that both of your doors are turned off now, and you don't see them in your project anymore. Okay, so you can turn the visibility of these categories on through here your visibility graphics override screen. Okay, and these will go and turn and hide things as an entire category, right? So like I said, either doors, windows, walls if you want to turn walls off for some reason, all right? You can go and hide those as an entire category, all right? You'll notice that topography kind of by default has itself shut off, all right? But again, you can see basically all the different categories here within Revit that you can turn on and off, all right? Aside from that, you can see that you have options here for projection / surface. All right. You have the options for cut, halftone, and the detail level. All right. So you can change and adjust these based on an entire category. So for example, all right, if we go to scroll down to walls, all right, you have lines, patterns, and transparency under projection / surface. All right. And then you have lines and patterns under cut. Right? Now the difference between the two, all right, is basically these are going to be visual overrides. Okay? Projection / surface. All right? So if you have objects in this plan view, right, that you can actually see the surface of them. So for instance, if you're looking at walls, you can't really see the faces or the surfaces of these walls, right? Because they're vertical and we're looking completely down. All right? We're looking in kind of like a horizontal view here. Right? So you can't see the projection / surface of them, right? But something like floors, all right, if we had a floor model in here, all right, we'd be able to see that, and you can see the surface of them, all right? And so what you can do is you can adjust the way that that surface looks, right? Whether it's the lines, all right, you can come in here and change the weight of the line, the color, right, the pattern, okay? Whether it's the patterns on it itself for the whole surface pattern, all right? So let's say you have a wood floor and it has the wood flooring pattern there. You can override that pattern and either shut the patterns off altogether, all right? You can change the color, you can override the pattern, all right? And the same with the transparency of that object, okay? And these are all kind of overrides that you can do, right? So you obviously have the default set depending on, what the materials are and everything like that, right? But you can come in here and as a full category is override that, right? Now, the options for lines and patterns under cut, all right, are for all the objects in this view that are being cut by that cut plane, all right? If we think back a few minutes ago to when we talked about the view range for your plans and that cut plane, so anything that's being cut in that cut plane, all right, would be able to be modified with the lines and patterns under cut, all right? So if we take walls, for example, right, under lines, let's say if all these lines here for the wall that are being cut, let's override it and say, let's make the lines red color, okay? Hit OK, all right, so we can see we have an override for it. So if we hit apply, right, you should see the outside lines, right, of the wall that are being cut. You should see those turn red, all right? So those cut lines are now turned red, all right, because we set an override for it. All right, same with patterns. If for some reason you wanted like a black crochet to be in these walls here, all right, let's say, or let's say we make it a dark gray pattern. It's a solid fill. All right, apply. All right, so now you can see that the patterns go away, right? So those hatch patterns that are associated with the material, those go away, and it now replaces it with a solid gray fill. Okay, and now again, these are just overrides. This isn't going to change the actual settings for the material, right? So it doesn't change the physical settings for your wall or anything like that, right? This is just overriding it in this particular view, okay? And so again, visually, these are kind of overrides, which you can clear back out, all right? But just kind of keep in mind the difference between those there, the projection / surface and the cut patterns, right? Or the cut options, all right? And how cut options, the lines and patterns are going to override for any of the objects that get cut in your view by that cut plane, right? And the projection / surface are going to be the objects you can see the surface for, all right? And being in the floor plan, all right, obviously the floors now we can see the surface of them, all right, and we can't see the surface of the walls. But if you can imagine either an elevation or a section view, all right, that are more of a vertical view, all right, is we're not going to be able to see the surface of our floors, right? So the floors are then going to be adjusted by the cut section here, all right, but we're going to be able to see the surface of our walls. So we'd be able to change the projection / surface lines for our walls and patterns, all right? So again, it depends on the view that you're actually in, and that will determine what side or what options you have for that particular object, okay? So again, you can either turn the visibility altogether on and off, all right, as a category, or you can override the settings here, okay? Now, under annotation, all right, any of your 2D elements that you draw in, right? So you can come here, you can see all your tags, all right, callouts, all right, dimension lines, anything like that. All right, you can do the same thing and either turn them on and off, right? So if you turn off dimensions and hit apply, right, you can see all the dimensions turn off, okay? Same with tags, anything like that. So if for some reason you go and you have all these window and door tags in here, and you're saying, you know what, there's a whole bunch of these in here, I don't want them, I don't want to delete them, but I also don't want to see them right now because it's just getting a little bit cluttered. All right, you can come into your visibility graphics override, come to the annotation tab, all right, and just turn those tags off, right, whether they're door tags, window tags, anything like that, all right? And so that way it kind of gives you a better working environment and gets it a little bit easier for you to view as you're working, all right? Now, analytical model, if you are using the analysis tools, the same goes for these. You can turn them on and off and override them. Okay. Imported categories. So if you have any CAD files that you import in, right? If you remember in the past class, we talked about importing CAD files, all right, and which layers to select and which layers to bring in with you, all right? If you have CAD files in here, it would list the CAD files out, and then you'd also be able to kind of open up those CAD files, and it would actually show you each one of those layers that you have loaded in there as well. All right. So not only do you have the ability to turn on and off different CAD files, all right, but you also have the ability to um, override certain layers and turn certain layers of those CAD files on and off, and override the colors for them, override the line styles, basically all that as well. So it's kind of a nice thing that you have and you're able to do once you actually link in and import CAD files into Revit, is you can then kind of go through and override them as well, not just have them there, just as kind of a dummy, um, you know, placeholder, but you can actually modify them in the way that they look as well. Okay. Now filters, all right. Although we won't get into too much detail on how you can do these, if you click on Add, all right, you can turn and create different filters for your views. So based on certain functions and certain um, values, rather, for different objects, all right, you can have certain objects get overridden and show up differently. All right, so if you wanted to with your filters here and you wanted to go in and play around with them, you can check everything from, say walls, right? And if the function equals interior, right, is you can filter those on and off. Okay. Um, you can also filter, by up to 3 different parameters that you have here. Right, it doesn't need to be function. This just happens with the default one here. All right, but you can essentially set up filters so that you can have certain elements filter out of your view, so you can either turn them on and off if you need to, right? Or whether it's turning them on and off, or you can see that you can override them in that given view. All right. So again, your visibility graphics screen, all right, is I would become familiar with this because you're eventually going to have to come back to this screen a number of different times, throughout building your model, whether it's to turn things on and off or kind of override them. All right. And this is kind of where you can go and override different objects as an entire category. All right. So, okay. All right. Aside from doing, your overrides by the entire category, all right, is I showed you how you can kind of hide individual elements. All right, is like when we hid this wall here, we selected it and right clicked and did hide in view. All right, and you can see you have the option of elements, the whole category, or by filter. All right, well, you also have the option to do for these objects. All right, if you select one and right click and do override graphics in view, if you select by element, all right, you have the same options that you can do to change the visual settings for this element. Okay, but now instead of changing all of the walls, all right, it's only going to affect this one single wall here, right? So if we change the cut patterns and said blue, all right, solid fill, all right, you can see that it just changes the solid fill for that one wall as opposed to all of them. All right, so if you're trying to do any sort of diagrammatic drawings, right, show which walls are fire rated, something like that, all right, you can go and filter out and just change individual walls to be overridden instead of all of the walls of the single category. All right, and that's how you can do that there. All right, so now that we've kind of gone over the settings for your drawings, all right, now whether it's the settings, the scale, anything like that, right, you have dimensions on it, everything, okay, is let's say you wanted to save all of these settings as a template, right? So the next floor plan you do at 1/8 inch, right, is every floor plan you're going to put on this set of drawings is you want to have the same settings, right? You want to have the same things shown, you want to have the same things hidden, everything like that, right? The whole visibility graphics screen, you don't want to have to go back and change that, right? You don't want to have to go back and change the scale every time, okay? Is what you can do is similar to the way that we made a project template, is we can make a view template as well, all right? And so there's a couple of different ways you can do this. Either A, scroll down um, in your properties box here for your view properties, and under view template here where it says none, right? You can click there to get to it. or if you go to the View tab on the top, right, on the left side, you'll see where you have View Templates. And if you click on the little drop down here, is you can either apply a template to the current view or create template from current view. All right. So what you can do is if you click create template from current view, all right, is it'll have you name it. I'm just in this project floor plan. All right. So we have a new view template. Okay. What it'll do is it'll bring you up into the view templates manager. All right. And you can see here project floor plan. That's the one we have. Right, and you have the option to change all of these. So the view scale, display model, right, visibility, graphics override for all the different tabs, and all of this stuff that you can click and edit and change. All right. Now, if you've already made the changes here in your view, all right, they're all going to be set for you already. Okay, so you don't have to go back through each and every one of these to change it. All right, but you can also choose whether or not to include these in your template. All right. Now, if you want to be able to change your scale around from view to view, all right, you might not want to include that. All right. Now, the reason you might not want to include something is if you're going to want to change it from view to view. So when you have something in a template and you apply a template to a view, all right, basically you can't change that setting anymore. All right. It's basically locked into whatever setting is set for that view template. Right. The only way you can change it is if you take that template off of your whole view. All right. Now, if you select in that view template to not include it, all right, that means that you'll be able to change that setting around however you wish. Right. So again, whether it's going to be the view scale or any of these other options, right, you can choose not to include them in the template. All right. But again, it's up to you and how much um, you want to kind of standardize throughout your whole project. Okay. So I'll hit OK. We'll say OK, project floor plan. All right. We've created that template now based on this floor plan. And in the view settings on the left, under view template, if we come down here, project floor plan, all right, if we select that as the template, hit OK. All right, basically that applies the template to this view. And like I said, is you'll notice that because we have that template on, is it doesn't allow us to change any of these settings now because those are all governed by that template. Okay. So again, is if you go and you apply a template to a view, make sure that you don't want to change any of these settings, all right, and it's going to be a standardized thing all the way through, right? But if you do, you can always come back and change it back to none and adjust those, or you can go and adjust your actual template itself. Okay. All right. So now that we've kind of gone through the settings, all right, you've gone through the floor plan, all right, we've gone through all the template stuff. All right, as we'll kind of quickly go through the rest of your views here, all right, and kind of go through the different settings, maybe some things that are different between them, right, as opposed to the other views, all right, how you can create new views. And then also we'll do some sheets and throw some views onto some sheets so you guys can get printing as well. Okay. And so under your view tab, if you look, all right, graphics, you'll see you have some, the visibility graphics screen here as well as filters, all right. I might have mentioned it before, all right, but this thin lines button that you'll also see up here as well, right, this basically turns line weights on and off in your view. So if you have that unchecked or unclicked, right, you'll be able to see the line weights here. And if you have it clicked, it's basically all thin lines and you don't see the line weights, right? Generally, I love to work without the thin lines just because, as you get to smaller scales or you try to zoom way in on something, right, is things get a little bit muddled depending on the scale you're at and depending on, the line weight, right? So you might actually miss something or you might not be able to see, the very good detail in the corners right here, right? So I generally like to work without it, right? I just find it a little bit easier, all right?